Hi, everyone. I'm Michele Tracy Berger. I'm an academic and speculative fiction writer. Everything I write tends to have an element of psychological horror to it. My collection Dalsey debuted last year in October with Aunt Loot Books, and it spans horror, contemporary fantasy, paranormal, and a little sci-fi. I'm also a coach, and if you are new here, this channel is named after my coaching practice, The Creative Tickle, where we take a fun and accessible approach to creativity, specializing in talking to writers. One of the things I love to do is connect with writers and hear about their process. I'm here today with Marie Vibbert, who is a science fiction writer. I'm really excited to talk to her about her writing and publishing journey and her latest book. Let me just do a brief introduction. Hugo and Nebula nominated author Marie Vibbert's short fiction has appeared over 90 times in top magazines like Nature, Analog, and Clarkesworld, and has been translated into Czech, Chinese, and Vietnamese. Her debut novel, Galactic Hellcats, which I loved, was longlisted by the British Science Fiction Award, and her work has been called, quote, everything science fiction should be by the Oxford Culture Review. She also writes poetry, comics, and computer games. By day, she is a computer programmer in Cleveland, Ohio. Marie, so excited to have you here.
So excited to be here. It's always interesting when somebody reads the bio for me, and I appreciate that because and this segues into the writing journey because I find it very hard to talk about myself, especially in a complimentary way. We're almost taught, especially as women, to be like, oh, this dress is pretty. No, 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 this is a rag. Or, oh, I look great. No, 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 I'm a mess. Oh, so I had a hard time selling my novels at first. I started writing novels way
Oh, yes.
before.
Tell us. Tell us a little bit about, yeah, your writing and author journey.
Yeah, I started writing novels way before short stories.
Mm,
When novels are the dominant form of fiction in America, and I started out wanting to write novels when I was a
mm.
kid, and I actually shipped out three novels while I was a high school senior, and that was back in the 90s when you could just send a novel to DAW or Doubleday. And I got nice, polite rejection letters because actually they were terrible. I was an 18-year-old kid. I didn't know what I was doing. Um, and I only turned to short stories because I was having trouble selling novels.
Mm.
And a friend said, well, try writing short stories. And, then you'll get a reputation. And this worked in more ways than one because writing short stories taught me about plot and structure. And novels need plot and structure. But novels are so big that you can kind of get away with not knowing what you're doing as much. Um, and you won't know why it's not working, why the plot doesn't feel right, why the tension drops. But in a short story, you only have so much space. You have to get it right. And it's easier to see a short story all at once, and take it apart and find out why it's working and why it isn't. So writing short stories and writing a lot of short stories made me able to go back to writing novels and be better at it. But I was still terrible at writing query letters. Um, used to be like,
Well, so let me just ask you, because I have kind of had a similar experience where, kind of getting lost in as an emerging writer years ago, getting lost in just kind of the vastness of a novel. But then you trained yourself to write short fiction, and that, is its own very specific kind of thing. And I'm just wondering, were you reading? Because I always read, a lot of novels, which led me to also want to write novels. But then when you have to read short fiction, which is really where a lot of also historically innovation in speculative fiction has come from short fiction, did you find, was that like an easy alignment, or did it take you a while to kind of feel like master that form as well?
oh, it took a while to master the form for sure, but I was already reading short fiction.
Ah, I
I
see.
liked it. I liked getting collections from the library,
Mm,
and I took English classes in college, and English classes always focus on the short story pretty much because no professor wants to grade a 100,000 word novel in a semester. Um, and when I was a student at Case, Western Reserve University, I discovered that you could take the short story writing class as many times as you wanted. And I actually ended up, I was a geology major and I graduated with an English major because it was like I had taken this one course like 19 times, and I meet with my advisor and he's like, you know, you only need like one credit to add a English major to your diploma. I'm like, really? Okay, let's do that. Um,
love that.
so I found it easy to find opportunities to study the short story. I started more intensely reading short fiction with the online magazines.
Mm.
I actually broke down and bought a subscription to Analog, which people ask me, how did you get into Analog? I was like, I bought a subscription. Every magazine's guidelines page says, if you really want to know what we like, read us. Um, and that's such simple advice, but it's easy to ignore, right? You're like, no, no, no.
Absolutely. And you tell writers, emerging writers, there's not a special trick. I mean, there's obviously a lot of work to crafting query letters, submissions, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but reading in the venue, the publication that you want to have your work seen in is so important, and that takes time to do.
Right.
So it
And
sounds, yeah,
and remember that this is a subjective business. The editor is choosing stories that vibe with them. So if you read a magazine and you're like, "Oh, I don't like these stories," you're not going to get into that magazine.
right, right, and understanding, yeah, why kind of breaking down the structure of a story, why don't you kind of like it, I think is also really valuable too. So okay, so you had this, started with novels, trained yourself with short fiction, and then came back to novels. And please tell us about your upcoming novel, and also what kind of goals and hopes you have for it. It's so exciting when you have a new, substantive piece of work out. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
It's This is my first time writing a sequel, and that was a little nerve-wracking. I wanted to meet all of the expectations of fans of Galactic Hellcats, because Galactic Hellcats did very well. It got lots of reviews and excitement. I even got fan art. Um,
Oh, yes. Very cool.
I love fan art. Um, so I asked every person who told me they read the book, at fairs, at signings. They would say they loved Galactic Hellcats, and I say, "Great, what do you want in the sequel?" And I would write down what they said. And then I had this enormous list of things, and I thought, okay, I'll just write that. Um, and my first draft was like, 300,000 words long. But it was, I I sold Galactic Hellcats on a tweet. I keep telling because I can't write. I think I could maybe write query letters now because I've learned to stop, saying bad things about myself and my work. But where I say it's a it's a book. I wrote it. It's not that great, but maybe you'll like it. Um, but then the publisher for Galactic Hellcats Vernacular Books, it was their best-selling book ever, and they said, are you interested in writing a sequel? And I said, yes, I am. So I wrote this really fast. I gave it to them. They accepted it. We signed a contract. They went out of business. Um, so I went back to this sequel, which was originally called Galactic Hellcats in Love, and I revised it heavily to be a standalone novel.
Mm,
Um, because I was told nobody wanted to buy a sequel to a published book, um, from a different publisher. And I wanted desperately also to break into larger press. And seeing as had Galactic Hellcats had been so popular, I started um, querying larger presses and asking them if they'd be interested in taking it on, or if they'd be interested in this new book now called Andrei and the Hellcats, about a
Mm.
sex positive sex robot. He loves his job, who who needs to enlist the Galactic Hellcats to save his sister. And the Galactic Hellcats are a space biker gang. No, they don't have motorcycles. They have solo flyer spaceships, but let's face it, they're a biker gang. Um, that
Charming, flawed, and
yeah,
everything in between.
that was my pitch. That was the tweet that sold the novel, is like girl biker gang in outer space. Um, rescues gay prince. And I've lost the track of what I'm going with. So I'm shopping it around, and I got two of the most horrifying rejection letters
Mm,
from medium
mm,
presses that both said they
mm,
absolutely adored the book,
mm,
loved it, but I am not already selling enough copies for them to take me on.
mm,
I needed to be more successful. And
mm.
so here I am thinking, great, I have doomed myself forever to be in the small press market because small presses sell small press numbers. Um, then Lethe Press, which
Mm.
is also a small press, but they've been around since 2001, which makes them practically ancient in the small press world, offered to take on both books.
Mm.
And their only question was, how do you feel about that cover? And I was like, I'm not attached to it. So they liked their covers, and Lethe Press made exquisitely gorgeous retro future covers. You got to see these covers. They're gorgeous for both books. Um, and so yeah, that's kind of the journey for
But
Andre. But
well,
it's a sequel, but you can read it as a standalone because
well, and I just want to highlight a couple of things that you said that are so powerful. One, the volatile nature of publishing. So my novella Renew You, that was published by a micro press a year after it came out. They had been established for a while, book smugglers, and they
oh, I remember
decided
Bookmarks. Yeah.
they were amazing. And but they decided it was two people living, one in Brazil and one in New York, that they were like, we're not able to support our authors in the way that we want to. So I had to find another publisher. And so that's very common in micro and small press. And I don't think people know that, sometimes when they're getting into this world. So I think that it's happens, even at kind of a mid-sized small press can happen. So I just want to mark that. And I want to come back to kind of the inner critics, negative self-talk, like how we have to overcome that. But so the power of like, tweeting, at the time, like getting the original deal on the tweet, which is amazing. But then having to navigate and really do the query letter and submission, which is a whole process
Beast.
in and of itself, right? And navigating, rejection, right? Because it is also about a mindset. You clearly believed in the work and you were able to kind of continue despite having those rejection letters. And I think
It's
yeah, that's just something that's really really important. I want to come back to that in a minute, but I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about the power of world building, because as we both are in the speculative fiction world. You tend to do, I think, at least from the Galactic Hellcats and some of the other work, kind of hard, not, I shouldn't say hardcore or sci-fi, but like world building. Whereas I feel like I often will take what we know and then have some other fantastical elements, or the sci-fi, my sci-fi story is really about an alien that comes to this world. So I'm just curious if you would say something a little bit about your love or passion of world building, or if that was always a part of your work. And
I think that even literary fiction has world building in it because you build a world around your characters that they inhabit.
absolutely.
Um, and to that end, I had this one short story that takes place in like modern day Cleveland, and I had a editor say, your world building is fascinating. The way the police treat the people is so alien. And I'm like, yeah. It's like, you've never been poor. Um, but I also, when I deal with, so I teach courses in writing speculative fiction,
Mm.
and a lot of newbie writers out there, they tend to put the cart before the horse. They tend to do their world building first. And world building can be a lot of fun. It's daydreaming. But if you
Research, right? Like
Yeah.
going down rabbit
But
holes.
if you have three binders of information on your world, you're writing a role-playing game, not a novel.
Mm.
Um, the I have a document in which I keep all of my, facts straight for the world of Galactic Hellcats, and it's 2 pages. That's how much, made up stuff is in my world building. World building is not a glacier,
Mm.
just a tip showing. World building is a paper mache tip of a glacier floating an inch below the surface. Um, I strongly recommend that. But yes, I do write in other worlds, the gods awoke especially. Now, the gods awoke, I admit, that thing had at least 10 pages of world building because I made up a pantheon of gods. They had different names for the days of the week. They had a different length week. They had money. They had um, diasporas of other cultures mixing in with them. So, but that was fun too, also. Um,
Yeah,
when Yeah, but it's often about, we write escapist fiction to escape back to our own world in a way.
I love that.
When I'm writing, I'm often writing about, the world I'm in. I'm angry about the way religion oppresses people, so I'm going to write a fictional religion to talk about that. Or I'm angry about the way that we don't prioritize education in this country, so I'm going to write a future story where we no longer have any free public education and show people what that looks like. Um,
And well, in Galactic Hellcats, there's interesting commentary on class and hierarchy among other features, and good speculative fiction, as you're indicating, reflects back to us to think about our world, right? Like it's so the world building, in some ways, I think is always it should be, even as unique and creative as it can be, it has something that relates to who we are as humans, right? Like it can relate back to our own experience to some degree.
And then sometimes it's just fun. Like the Ratonese people wear fancy eye makeup
Yeah,
because I grew up in the 80s and I really love fancy eye makeup. But also I needed some kind of hat, the funny hat alien. You
yeah.
got to put something on people so that the reader immediately knows, oh, that person's from this planet. Um, and in the sequel, in Andrei, one of the things I really wanted to do was have them go to more new different planets, because that's what I
Mm.
loved as a kid, reading pulpy science fiction. Just, these cool new worlds. So they go to a world called Old Hope, um,
Mm.
which I had a lot of fun with Old Hope, which the people who live there call Hope. Thank you very much. Uh, which was in this story, it was the first colonized extrasolar planet. But it's also a planet that orbits a red giant and doesn't get a whole lot of sunlight. So it's very dreary. It always looks like it's sunset there. It's kind of based on Beetlejuice. Uh, but the to combat that, they have exquisitely beautiful opalescent opalescent skyscrapers with glass traceries and lots
Mm.
of color and neon light. That the locals use to make their planet beautiful. And they're kind of a utopia. I like them. And then I contrast that with another world, which is called Woolworth World. Uh,
Ah.
I really thought the editor would ask me to change the name. That was supposed to be a placeholder, although my first placeholder was super capitalist land. Uh, guess why I wanted to go there? And it's called Woolworth World, and it's best known for its warehousing. And yeah, they don't have a fun time on Woolworth World.
Well, and for those watching who are like maybe I'm not sure if Woolworth was a global brand, but if you grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, Woolworth was sort of a discount store that had sort of a pre-Amazon in some ways, and it had lunch counters and all
Yeah,
sorts of things, but it was sort of a pre before the dollar types of stores, right?
yeah, yeah. Or you had the dollar store, you had Woolworths. And
Mhm.
the Woolworths in Cleveland is now the House of Blues
Okay.
concert venue on Euclid Avenue near East 4th Street. And I should have, I have a coffee mug. I still have a coffee mug that I bought at that Woolworths when it was closing.
Oh,
It
that
says
is,
Marie on it, and it was on the table, and it was the only name mug they had left, and it was my name. It was meant to be, and it was 70 cents.
oh my God. Okay, you need to find that and put that on Instagram. That's a very with a
It's an
story.
artifact. It's an artifact, yeah.
One of the things, and then I want to ask you a little bit about inner critics and judges, but just as one thing that I really enjoyed about Galactic Hellcats and your world building is that issues of adornment are important, right? And the Rackanese sort of speak to that, but that adornment and gender across a lot of different kinds of gender performance, I think is really interesting in the story. So, but adornment as part of, someone who Renew You was about a virus that was moving through a everyday hair care product. So I think we don't think enough about beauty and adornment in terms of world building and societies and culture. So just want to give you a
Yeah.
shout out.
Yeah, I think people, well, I think that we frequently denigrate things that are of interest to women
Hmm.
and feminine presenting people.
Hmm.
But the adornment is most important for Thane, right? The prince, because
Yes,
he's
yes.
cool. But also, like Zuleika, who is is an upper class person from the same planet, she's very aware of the class indicators of adornment. And so is Margot too, when she looks at Key and is like, wow, your spacesuit has patches on it, and I can tell where you've colored in the sleeve with a marker so that it's the same color. Um, the the ways like physical culture, um, world building, if you're doing world building, people always they think about things like politics and genealogies and religions, but physical culture is so much a part of a world. And that's the part of the world we can touch and hold. Um, what do the cups they drink out of look like? Do they sit in chairs or kneel on pillows? Um, these are things that are going to change the shape of rooms, that are going to change the shape of lives. So, um, I had a lot of fun with that. And you're gonna love Andre because Andre as a main character is he's obsessed with fashion. Um,
And we meet him in Galactic Hellcats toward the
yes,
middle to the end of the book, right? Okay, so
right, yeah, right, yeah. About 3/4 of the way in the book, Andre and his sister Autumn are minor characters in Galactic Hellcats, and they help the Hellcats. And that brings the wrath of the evil queen down on them in book two. Um, but Andre was so fun to write. And, when I was staring at this long list of things everybody wanted in the sequel, they wanted me to have actual requited romance, which like I don't do requited romance, but okay for you, my friends. Um, they wanted a noble sacrifice at some point. They wanted,
Mm.
yeah, the things they wanted, and I was like, but how do I get into the story? And one day I just had this idea, why don't I write it from Andre's point of view? And then bam, it was like, yes, now I'm excited because he's such a fun character. He loves he loves humans a lot. He loves fashion and he loves cocktails. Even though he doesn't drink cocktails, he mixes cocktails for the humans. So he's always aware. He's like, we're traveling with a human. Humans need changes of clothes and cocktails and things like that. He's he's so fun. He is the sassiest pansexual friend we'll ever have. And he might have made the book longer than it needed to be because he keeps having all of these asides where he's
Well, but that's a good thing. Having more of Andre, I think, is a good thing. Um, so I just want to touch on I've for those who might have watched other videos. I'm very interested in the kind of psychological terrain of inner critics, inner evaluators, inner judges. And at the beginning, you were talking about kind of that negative self-talk and how we all have that as creative people. And I'm just curious if you have strategies or tips for how you manage inner critics, or if you maybe you don't think of them in that way, but like kind of how you navigate with that.
yeah, I call it the lizard brain that tells me that you're no good. Everything you do is bad. You're worse than everybody. Um, or possibly it's just my mother. You rotten, rotten child. Um, my one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from Maureen McHugh,
Mm-hmm.
a winning science fiction author who used to live here in the Cleveland area, and is honestly just a lovely person and gave amazing critiques in writing workshop. But the thing she said was, writer's block is not the inability to write. It is the belief that what you are writing is shit. And that was
Mm.
it cracked me up. And she's like, I love telling that to people who are young enough to be scandalized by the word. Um, but the thing I find most frequently is, yes, that belief that this story isn't worth it. It's obviously garbage, or I'm not going to be able to finish this draft because it's garbage. And then I just say, okay, we're going to write the garbage. We're going to
Mm.
write a garbage first draft. I give myself permission. No one's going to see it. It's going to be garbage, but it's going to be my garbage. Um,
So powerful.
yeah.
So powerful. And I think, for you have the experience, like what's interesting talking to really well-established writers, you can have novels under your belt, you can have 90 publications and stills. I think when you're an emerging writer, you just think, oh, at some point I'll just know I'm, really good and it just kind of
Oh, I'm
things will be easy.
sorry.
But that's not right. That's not true. And even with the body of work and experience, we still need to attend to that inner voice, right? And I love that. Yeah, right. I'm just going to write the garbage, right? Like you can't stop me from writing garbage. I'm just going to see where this is going as a
And you
way to
can
combat.
always revise
Yes.
garbage. It's
Yes.
easier to revise garbage than to revise a blank page.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Absolutely. And I always say, inner critics historically are about, they're a sort of protective mechanism. They start out as a protective mechanism, but then they, to protect us from, ridicule and all of the things that the ego worries about. But then they become more inflated over time and they take on a greater and greater role. So we have to, my theory is we have to manage them. We have to talk back to them, as you're saying. We have to be more proactive so that then they can kind of take the back seat, right? Or come in at a time where the evaluation when the work is already done and you're kind of editing it, or looking for kind of more critical, but not in that first, the incubating or the creative stage, right? That's not really where we need them.
I like that you said that that's a good thing to remember, that it starts as a protective thing. And a, a lot of being a writer is just being brave enough to shed your, carefully constructed persona shell and be seen.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
the there is that mortification of, oh no, they see me. Um, but you have to be honest in what you're writing to write well, to write something interesting, to write something people will be passionate about. It's all about, you know, digging into the quick and being honest, which can be terrifying. Even though I'm writing about, aliens in outer space, there's still so much of me in there that, um, yeah, my own prejudices, my own wrong ideas, my obsession with strangely attractive young men who are in danger. Don't look at me, look at me, look at me, don't look at me.
I love it. I love it. So there's so many more things I want to ask you. So I'm gonna have you on again as a part two or down the line after your book is out. But I'm wondering if you would say, because I think I'd asked this before, but then we started talking about something else. One, tell people, you know, kind of where people can find you and they can find out all the scoop about, the book. And please tell us the title again. And then just, one wish or hope that you have for this novel.
You can find me at marievibbert.com, Marie, V as in victory, I, B as in boy, B as in boy, ERT.com. It's fun having both V's and B's in your names. Um, the Andrei and the Hellcats comes out July 14th. That's Bastille Day. Vive la France. And what I really hope is to for people to love it. I want people to enjoy this. I want it to give them a breath of fresh air in these dystopian times. I want people to fall in love with Andre like I did. I want fan art. To that end, I'm having a launch party July 2nd at Loganberry Books, and I'm going to give a special limited edition shot glass with the logo for the Galactic Hellcats gang to anybody who brings fan art. Um, I'm
Oh, oh, that's very exciting. Yeah, I might even have to try, and I'm not an artist, but I might have to try my hand at that because your characters are so compelling and fun, and I can see why people are inspired to do fan art for them. Thank you so much, Maria. I'm so excited for this book and the launch, and I hope people find you in all sorts of places. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a delight.